I'd say the key principle of human being is that we are literally addicted to growth. We want to learn, we want to develop, we want to acquire new skill, we want to grow stronger mentally, psychologically, physically. This is where we're like, wow, life does taste good. A high performance team is a team where growth is happening. How do you recover? You open that bottle of wine, because that's going to make you feel better and destroy your sleep, destroy all your recovery principle, or actually have you learned and researched and understand that actually when you're really tired and you want to recover, well, maybe the best way is have like a good and light meal, plenty of water, go to bed early.
Michka Guerrier is a director at PwC and the founder of High Realities. With over 16 years of global experience, Michka integrates elite sports methodologies into the business world, helping individuals and teams reach their full potential. Michka, welcome to the show. Great to have you back again.
Thanks a lot, Brad. Pleasure, as always. Great reconnecting with you and the Resilience Institute. Yeah.
Likewise. So for those who haven't encountered your work, perhaps you could just share a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Sure. So I'd say a little bit multifold. So one pillar of the last 20 years plus, I've been focusing on business consulting, IT consulting, and basically creating, building up, leading teams and services as part of management consulting, also as part of my role within PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I'm leading risk consulting and now being based in Switzerland, so leading that for Western Switzerland. And that's occupied a bit of my time, I can assume, for the last 20 years plus. And aside of that, I'd say ever since I was maybe 4 or 5, I've been kind of, absolutely passionate about sports. Embraced sports in the shape of tennis, which I try to push the professional levels. Over there, moved over when I finished my tennis career to something that was always in the back of my mind, which was fighting sports, which I found absolutely fascinating. So competed in Thai boxing, also mixed martial arts and free grappling when I was based, especially in the UK.
This episode is brought to you by the Resilience Institute's new Resilience Assessment. It's designed to redefine how we understand and enhance organizational resilience with features like leadership lenses so that you can view your data from multiple perspectives. Imagine being able to understand mental health risk or well-being, resilience, even happiness within your organization and team by team. The tool features simplified scoring and it's based on our robust and reliable resilience diagnostic and development framework. The resilience assessment is designed to equip leaders with the tools needed to support a thriving workplace. It's built on 2 decades of research, 5 rounds of psychometrics, and it will help you to identify risks like burnout before they affect your team, empowering you to build a healthier and more productive work environment. So click the link in the show notes below or visit resilienceeye.com and sign up for a demo. You can try it for yourself or book a demo for your team. The resilience assessment is where well-being meets performance, ensuring that your team not only survives, but thrives. Let's get back to the episode.
And I'd say the last 15 years I've been focusing a lot on everything that relates to the mountains, so climbing, ski mountaineering, and so on. And trying to turn that also into a profession, so professional levels and getting a international mountain guide certification. So that's kind of so the other professional projects I've been working upon. And that leads to basically the thing that is so significant to me that I've built up now almost 8 years ago, which was basically founding High Realities. And you could say it's, it's the outcome of the 2 pillars that I just mentioned. So it's basically a company that draws insights, and that means tools, strategies that do work in reality. High Realities comes from that, right? It's the kind of the contrary of high potential. It's like, yeah, I could if I had, and if and if and if. It's like, okay, how about reality and making things happen in the real world, right? So it's our drawing these strategies, insights, and tools from worlds inside corporates, right? So companies, but especially, in the worlds of sports, elite sports, extreme sports, high intensity sports like boxing, but also Olympic sports, Olympic coaching, and trying to see what bridges can be made to people who work in companies, and literally with tools that can be applied right now and not in 10 or 20 years from now, and have also a direct impact. So the company I created is called High Realities, and we're about 10 working in that, a mixture of high elite athlete, high elite coaches, but also high ranked business people who also have a big understanding and experience in the world of sports.
Excellent.
So that's it in a nutshell. Yeah. And by the way, just as a correlation of that, which also links to the topic of today, building high performing teams. This is also why for me, this is so critical that I have, this role in High Realities and this role, within business consulting and PwC, because I can always, on a daily basis, put in practice, what I research, what I teach, and what we stand for at High Realities, right? So it's rooted in the reality of leading teams, building teams, working in teams.
Yeah, it's so important that it's not just theoretical what you teach. I find so much value in the fact that day to day I lead a team and we're navigating change and disruption and challenge, and we have to practice and walk the talk, because then you know that it actually works in reality.
It's like in boxing, right? If I ask you, Brad, and I know you have taken up a little bit boxing, or you had a little bit, but basically I've tell you, hey, well, the jab is basically that, you throw your front hand and rotate the hips a little bit and the shoulders. So, I can describe to you what a jab is, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, so I can go out and, have a professional fight, stand up in the ring. Well, probably not, right? Because that's exactly that, you learn what a jab is supposed to be, a kick is supposed to be, and then you actually throw that jab and you're like, huh, actually, no, that's not working so well. And it's crazy. Even a jab, you can spend years, and boxers spend years working on that, because you need to understand so much, and you realize that you need to understand so much and know so much when you actually do it. And you're like, the impact is not there. My opponent, he always sees it like a miles away before I actually throw it. And that's exactly that, right? So there's a theory, then you put it in practice and you realize, oof, there's like these 10 other elements I hadn't thought about. Okay, let's go back to the books, right?
Yeah.
Research, practice, implement again. Okay, a little bit better, but I'm still missing that. So yes,
I totally
practice,
agree.
practice, practice.
And I was inspired after our first conversation actually to go and sign up, and I signed up with a kickboxing, a Muay Thai gym. And it was interesting. After the first couple of months of practice, the teacher said, okay, now it's time for the 1, 2, 3. And I said, oh, what's the 1, 2, 3? And he said, the third one is the one that's coming towards you. And it's very different when suddenly you're not just thinking about your own technique, but there's something else in the mix. It's more than pads. And the power of drilling and practicing means that when that moment comes, you're not overthinking. And I think that's what's missing sometimes in the workplace when we theoretically talk about a high performing team rather than, drill and practice and create space, the dojo.
Yes, learn, like resilience, right? Learned
Yeah.
response. That's so critical. If you remember, I'm not a big fan of Kundera, the writer, but some things he
Oh,
said are
yes.
actually pretty cool. So
Mm,
he once said, I think, in the unbearable lightness of being,
mm,
that like life is a little bit like a theater play, except that you can't rehearse. And the point that you just raised is so critical, because you can't rehearse, that also means that quite often, especially in critical situation, you will have to act, react, and decide in the spur of the moment. It's not like you're in a critical situation or conversation, you can say, hey, I'm taking a 10-minute break or a 1 week break to read a book about it, and then we return to the conversation. You
yeah.
might be able to do that in some instances,
Yeah.
but probably if you always do that, your impact will be less. It's like you go into a ring, you don't know what's going to be thrown at you, right?
Yeah.
So you should have rehearsed and trained a lot of scenarios so that you are then in difficult situation able to try at least and have the best chances of to make the most and the best of the situation. And this is where the learned response for anything, including building up teams, is so critical, because in the moment of a difficult conversation, you might only have a few hints and
Mm.
feelings and things and ideas that pop up in you, right? And you have to work with these, right? You don't have like a screen book that's going to tell you do A, B, C. And that's where, trusting these instincts, but also having a lot of experience and training behind that to say, okay, I recognize the situation. This is when these kind of things are happening. So let me, use rule book ABC, and
Mm.
hopefully they will help. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It's part practice and part having confidence in the moment to trust
Yeah.
yourself. And that confidence comes from practice most of the time. If you've done it before, or if you trust yourself, you're more likely to be able to be agile and go, okay, well, in this moment, the first thing I'm going to do is calm myself down, because people forget about that. They go straight into fight, flight, freeze, and then things
Yeah.
go wrong. So it's even just, okay, so what are my options here? And then moving forward.
And even that, that point is critical, but calming yourself down requires, because fully agree, right? We are like, our biggest tool and biggest weapon is the brain.
Yeah.
Very cognitive beings, we're very
Mm.
intelligent,
Mhm.
right? So this is actually, that's where most of the power lies. But if you're going fight or flight, basically you lose like so much
Energy.
of your engine power,
Mm.
basically.
Mm.
But in order to calm yourself down, first of all, you need to understand that this is the best way of acting, right? So that's something you need to learn, because if you're not convinced, if you think actually fighting or fleeing is the best response, you will probably go to fight or flight,
Yeah.
right?
True.
And that's, for example, if you go again towards boxing, go for it, go in the ring, lose your nerves, lose your emotions, see what happens, right?
Yeah.
So, and I can already tell you what happens most of the time. Within a minute, you're completely drained. You might throw big punches. Maybe you have a lucky punch, and then you will one fight. On average, you will drain yourself so fast. And what happens
Mm.
after you're drained? Your opponent can, pick you apart like if you were nothing. You can't even raise your hand up again. So that's something you can either learn the hard way or learn through coaching and so on.
Mm.
But once you know that actually, hey, in the heat of the moment, the best response is calming
Yeah.
myself down, at least you have an intention. Then you need the tools, right? Which is then the
Yeah.
learned response. How do I actually do that, right? And then you can act accordingly. So again, requires experience, requires coaching, requires, people that know better than you and say, hey, I've trained these guys who became world champion. This is how I trained them to be clinical in the
Mhm.
ring. Feel free to ride your emotions, but that's going to lead to disaster. And then practice, 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 and see that it actually works. We're not stupid. If it doesn't work, then we won't use
Yeah.
it. But when we see that it works, then it becomes a learned response, because we know it works and we got the tools and to make that work.
In your
Yeah.
experience, what are some of the drivers of high performance in a team?
Based on all the psychological researches that I've seen out there, read out there, is one of, I'd say, the key principle of human being is that we are literally addicted to growth. We want to learn, we want to develop, we want to acquire new skill, we want to grow stronger mentally, psychologically, physically. This is where we're like, wow, life does taste good when you actually are growing, right? So if you actually translate that in a team environment, a high performance team is a team where growth is happening. And the biggest growth, the most high performing team. That was also my experience. And that's also why, like, I was obviously like unconsciously referring to a lot of boxing examples, but there was really, if there was one, domain where I experienced like the most significant growth and transformation, it was in fighting gyms, right? And it was super high performing because everybody who was showing up in the gym knew that this is what we are looking for individually, right? We're looking, to get the most out of us, our full potential, psychologically, cognitively, learning the combination, the movements, and
Mm.
physically. and everybody was on the same boat. So you enter that kind of, second world where actually everybody is looking for growth and shaping each other's diamonds, and we do it together, right? So that was the common understanding, belief, consciously and subconsciously, that this is growth that's happening there, right? And that's what makes you want to show up there, because maybe you're tired, maybe things have happened, maybe this, maybe that, but like, yeah, okay. But still, the meaning in my life, the direction is growth. So I want to go out there, even though it might be difficult today, right? And that creates a lot of performance as a team. Obviously, there's further elements that we can talk about. I think there's a huge element, and it's also related to growth. It's how you stand to failure, because again, if you're looking for growth, it means you're gonna try new things. It means you're gonna play the lines. You want to become a world champion. You won't do it by doing like just the basic things. Also in tennis, so you will look silly, you will look foolish, you will try new things, you'll be a bit clumsy, you will fail, but yeah, then it's the question how, as a team, you deal with failure, and that is massively important. Because if as a team you are not allowing the team individuals to fail and fail and fail and learn from failure, not celebrating failure, the goal is not to fail, but you have to try things out that will probably not work out, and trying to learn from that as an individual and as a team. This is how also growth will happen. So I think that is also a massive element.
What do people talk about as a key driver of high performance, but it often doesn't deliver? Any thoughts of some of those common tips that you hear that might be less valuable than we think they are?
Sure. So happy to share some thoughts, but also reverting back to high performing teams. I think one element we haven't really mentioned, and it's kind of a correlation of the growth, but the word empowerment, and what it means is basically, as humans, on average, basically we don't like when people say, hey, you should feel that, you should do this, and we like to determine the way we live, basically, and have the freedom to do so, being able to be creative. And I think that is huge. It's basically handing over the ownership to each person in the team, no matter the rank, no matter the seniority. Hey, it's your life, it's your way, it's your decisions, it's your ownership, it's your responsibility. And I think that is fundamental.
Yeah.
If you betray that aspect of the human mind in a team, I seriously doubt you will achieve anything, especially not midterm and long term. Maybe short term you have like productive teams, but you will never reach like the highest grade. So that empowerment is also absolutely critical. And there's lots of other elements, right? So as a team, high performing, knowing each other, having trust, right? Also is connected to failure, right? So if I trust that my teammate will have my back kind of no matter what happens, then I will dare to make the step. If I know that when I fail or when I look silly, I'm going to be stabbed in the back on top of that, I'll make sure that I will not fail and I will not look silly, because I don't want to be on the ground and be kicked on the ground, right? So, and that requires a lot of work. Knowing each other, right? Seems something like, so this guy has, he's got a dog, two daughters, they go to that school, and he's been with that company for 12 years. I know that person. Do you know that person? When you basically have the bullet points of the biography, knowing a person is knowing, okay, how does the person function? What does the person desire? What's the person afraid of? How much do you actually truly know your team members? Is a difficult question, but I think also super key.
Yeah, very good point. And when you look at high performing teams, I mean, an obvious example is like Navy SEALs, right? They train specifically to be a high performing team because they have to. And they become a brotherhood. They love each other, and they're not afraid to express that. because there is that trust, psychological safety, mastery. They practice, practice, practice. They reach that level of the point where they can be autonomous and empowered to do what they need to do. I wonder how we could transfer that kind of culture to the workplace. Is it the fact that we need a strong sense of purpose to align people to that degree? And maybe it's impossible in the workplace, but we can move towards that, surely.
Yeah, no, and to be honest, if that is impossible in the workplace, then we should stay out of the workplace. Literally. So we have to seek daily, hourly for the meaning and the purpose.
Mm,
What are we doing? Why are we actually doing that? What's the direction? How is that connected to growth as a team and for the individuals also within the team, which also means the individuals also have to look for the connection to their own growth. Because if they can't find it, well, probably they need to look elsewhere,
mhm,
right? Because it's not being mean. It's just, look, obviously you can't go in that environment. You can hang around, but I can predict that it's going to be a lose-lose situation. Either you'll be like burnt out or so depressed, or you will just end up quitting in any case. So it's just lost time. So you have to find purpose, right? And
mm,
again, yes, not saying this is easy, just saying this is actually really, really fundamental. And that breaks down, it's as a team, having common goals, but then each individual also looking for that. And I think the very similar principle, like you mentioned for Navy SEALs, they do apply. So trust again happens when you know each other very, very deeply. We talked also, the connection to growth, so working together to a meaningful purpose, how you also deal with failure. And that also, in a nutshell, also goes with role modeling, right? The leader role modeling the behaviors in the team, but also each person in the team role
mm,
modeling, the values, and the work that the team is putting in, right? So that
mm,
also will create that environment. And not to be, you know, undervalued is also, all the learned response and the learned strategies. So how you communicate within a team, whether it's SEALs or non-SEALs, will have a huge impact on the team. Because yes, if you might spend as much time as you want within a team, if you don't know how to communicate, how to spend the time, maybe you won't have that much impact. And that correlates to, to the question you asked just before. What's said to be like a key driver but often doesn't deliver. So for me, like the most hilarious examples like I keep on seeing actually on a regular basis is, having, for example, a leader like from a company or from a team and coming in and, valuing transparency and open exchange so much, right? Which is, something that is supposed to deliver high performance and so on. And for example, coming up in a meeting, hey, we have a transparent culture, we can trust each other. I really want to help. So let's share openly, everybody in the team, how is it going? What are issues? Let's put them on the table, right? So I'm so transparent and so on. And what happens usually, you have like, 5 minutes where like nobody, you can hear the flies,
yeah.
flying in the room because everybody is like, hmm, yeah, yeah, not sure I'm gonna say anything. So that's, for example, typically something that doesn't deliver the best intentions, right?
Mm,
And surely authentically, right? The best intentions, but you can't just demand trust, right? So,
no.
and that's where I go towards learned responses, because one of the things you learn in communication and leading teams, if you do read the books basically and go to trainings, is amongst others stating your intention. So you want some information from the rest of the team, maybe in a meeting, maybe in an exchange, maybe even in a one-to-one conversation. You start the conversation with stating why you want to know something. What are you going to do with that? What's the purpose? Because I want to get the information and ask, if I ask you, Brad, hey, Brad, how are you today? And in your mind, you're like, do I look like, I'm not doing well? Is there like a bad news that's going to happen? and therefore he wants to know whether I'm, feeling good today, because now he's going to break like a bad news to me. If I say, hey, it's been a long time, Brad, we haven't been chatting together, really
Mhm.
wondering how life is going. Just want to know, how is family, how are you feeling? I know, you've got things running with the Resilience Institute. So how are things on your side? There you're like, oh, okay, so he just actually wants, to catch up,
Yeah.
basically. Very
Mm,
different conversation, right? With the same intention.
yeah. It's about
So
framing
that
and
is one thing, yeah.
yeah, and spending time with people in advance. So it's not going to be strange when you come up to the person and say, let's have a chat about your feelings, because that's going to throw
Exactly.
someone
Like,
like right off. But if you talk about feelings every week, which I do with some of my team members, it's completely normal and it's great. Like, you can say, how are you feeling about this? And they will share, especially the younger people.
like the quantity of time versus quality of time, right? To your
Yeah.
point. And in my terminology, also what you are referring to is also some kind of predictability. So, if you have a behavior that's, again, you put in practice regularly, and, people know you're truly interested in how they are and certain topics and growth, and, going into the full picture, then when you come up with a question like that, like, oh yeah, it's just Brad, it's
Exactly.
not just like, hmm.
Exactly. Exactly. Any thoughts about high performing teams together navigating setbacks and adversity? It's natural, it's always going to happen, but how can we be better at managing those downs?
I think there's quite a few things to say also in that regard, right? So if you talk about setbacks, but also especially challenges, right? So again, we said if you're looking for growth, you're gonna set goals for the team that are actually not easy to achieve, right? Maybe it's a new service, maybe it's a new product, maybe it's bringing a new team together, maybe it's entering a new market. So there will be uncertainty, there will be challenges on the way. Whether work is going to be rewarded is going to be possibly also a question mark, because it's challenging. Like, think about these Olympic athletes. I remember, I think it was about 8 years ago, something like that. There's a man in the 100 meters final who probably had trained, the last, I mean, anyway, his whole life, right? But especially the last 4 years leading up to Olympics, so hard. And he even managed to come to the finals. Then guns, like the gun, he starts, the race is stopped. Actually, he started too early. Second and last chance. The gun, boom. He starts a little bit too early. Disqualified. That's it.
That's it.
So that, that is something extremely, extremely sobering. Hard work leading to nothing. That's also what can happen as a team. So, usually when I look at that, I think one absolutely key element is to understand and to know that maybe you, if you're a team leader or team member, you might have challenges and, adversity on the way, and that you recognize, right? But maybe the other team members in your team, maybe they see others, like other challenges, other sources of threats. Maybe you see very different ones. Maybe they're not aware at all, actually, of the situation. So, in my view, it's really critical to, as a team, to put that on paper and say, hey, these are our goals and our objectives, and let's map out, what are the challenges that we all, right? We gather all of them, we see as a team that's, on our way, right? And trying to list them out, basically. And then going one next step, basically, some of these challenges you will see they're like inherent to the goal, right? If you want to run 100 meters in 9:69 seconds, you will have to put the hard work in the gym, on the tracks, and so on. Yes, sometimes it might not be that pleasant, but if you want that goal, you have to go through it.
Mhm.
But if you want to launch new services and new products and so on, and yes, you will have to convince new customers to get references, credentials on the market, and win, do a lot of business development and be convincing and so on. Yes, this is a challenge which is inherent to the goal, because it's a new service, it's a new market, right? But maybe what's not inherent to the goal, if your biggest source of challenge is navigating politics within your company, because some people think, hey, that's not the way, and actually you should do also this on top of that. And is that inherent to that goal? No. So
Mm.
maybe when it's separating what is a stone, something that's blocking the way, rock on your way, or what is a step that you need to rise up to in order to get to that goal. And when you recognize stones and rocks, it's finding out strategies to get rid of them, because they're not bringing any value. Losing hours every day on politics internally is not helping me winning new clients and bringing that new service on the market, right? So looking at that as a team, listing that out, what's a challenge that's inherently connected to the goal, and what's a challenge that actually we should really
Yeah.
do our utmost best to get rid of.
And so much energy is expended on rocks that actually don't need to be there,
Yeah.
reducing our overall vitality and distracting us really from getting to the next step. Very good point. Very good point. Burnout. Thoughts on burnout? I've had some interesting conversation recently. Some people say burnout is the fault of a leader. Some say it's the system. Leaders say it's the people. How do we deal with burnout, or maybe even mitigate the risk of burnout?
And maybe, Brad, if you just while we were asking the question, like another thought came to me with regards to setbacks and adversity. Just before we deep dive into that massive topic,
Please.
right,
Yeah.
of burnout. So we talked about navigating challenges, right, and adversity, but actually navigating and dealing with setbacks we didn't quite touch upon it. And I think that point is actually really, really important. Also, if again, looking back in the sporting world, um, that's also critical, right? So there was a boxer in the 90s and year 2000s. I think it was called Prince Nassim, from the UK, extremely flamboyant, like dancing all the time, making massive entries and fooling around with his opponents on the ring, always dancing, fighting without guard, and winning one fight after the other. He won like tens and tens and tens of fights, and he was literally just dancing and fooling around on the ring and humiliating his opponents, basically in a nutshell, because he was just so good. Until the day came when he actually fought Canelo, which probably everyone knows nowadays,
Mm.
right? And Canelo literally thrashed him, right? He didn't have a chance to do anything, and that's it. That was the end of the career, because he
Yeah.
was in his mindset basically not able to rebound after that, and therefore I think that's such a critical question as a team, as an individual, right? So are you quitting and giving up after a failure for the right reasons, or are there tools maybe to try to approach that? And one tool that I'm a very big fan of, relating now to the business world, I had like 20 years ago, I met someone who was the CEO of a self-funded private equity company, very successful in London. It was quite interesting because meeting with him, there's a lot of guys, in ties and formal, and there was like some random guy sitting in the corner in a loose pink t-shirt, and that was him, right? the CEO of the company. So really, you wouldn't have noticed. And he told me his story, which I found extremely interesting also in that regard. So he was basically working for Barclays for a few decades and responsible for the whole of London and Greater London. So, like the massive position, going through the
Mm.
ranks, going every day to the office with his 3-tier, kind of attire, and looking super classy, and going through the ranks, basically, and being very successful at it. Until one day, kind of out of the blue, Barclays pulled him out and say, "Hey, yeah, actually, goodbye." Right? And the people were like, "Huh? What the heck? What's
Mm.
happening?" And his comment was that in hindsight, that was the best thing that could ever happen to him in his life, because he had such golden handcuffs that the way and the path was just too good to leave. Right? So he really wouldn't have left that. And when that happened, when that big failure, that big surprise failure happened, he tried to consciously look at the two sides of the coins. Yes, there was the loss. Yes, there was the career opportunity. There was basically gone. But what was the other side of the failure? What's the other side of the coin? And that is the difficult one to look at because there's a lot of emotions when you fail, right? That's why Prince Nassim didn't manage to overcome these emotions. So it's probably you need to let it sit a little bit, how to do right in the moment. But we have the intention to look back at this situation and consciously trying to learn from that. What doors is getting closed, but what is getting opened? Okay, well, finally, actually, I do have time. I do have the opportunity to go into entrepreneurship. That was for him, right? And actually, I always wanted to go in that domain of private equity because I've got a super interest and I'm very knowledgeable in this area. So let me try to create a company, which ended up proving super successful after 10 years of that. Never would have happened without the failure. So it's really like a difficult but a necessary exercise, which is also used. You mentioned the SEALs, right? They always have a learned protocol after every mission, especially a mission that fails. You have to go back to it, analyze, and see what you can learn so that you can grow from the situation. And I think this is key as a team, right? So you don't hide the failures. You have a protocol. You look back into that. You learn from that, and next time you'll be better.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And that's really how you build resilience and even anti-fragility. I don't know if you have any thoughts before we go into burnout on anti-fragility, because we know that muscles can grow stronger as a result of some stress or pressure. I'm sure that this applies to humans and teams as well.
So, if you look at, basically resilience as a team and not being fragile or being actually strong, phrasing that positively, I think the greatest source of that you're looking for energy, right? In that regard, and this is again the connection to growth. If your purpose, is so connected to growth as a team, the hunger will be there. You will want to show up. You will want to do things, and that means when you are suffering, because you will suffer, in instances physically, emotionally, and there will be setbacks and so on. But you have the hunger to come back and come back and come back and come back. So that's probably the source of anti-fragility. And then you have obviously to combine that with knowledge, right? So education is key. It's okay, good. I've got the hunger, but also linking that to the next topic of burnout. Hunger is not enough, right? Because you can also burn yourself out in the process of that, and that's where basically knowledge becomes fundamental at an individual level. And to your question, like, who is to blame in burnouts? Well, in my view, there's, first of all, nobody is to blame, but there's actually, at the end of the day, there's one person responsible, and that's you. It's us as individuals. Nobody can hand you, Brad, on your plate what you actually want and what you actually need. It's because I don't have a clue. I might have ideas and so on, but it's so ever changing, and one day it might be this one. There's fundamentals, obviously, but basically it's your job, right? And it doesn't mean it's an easy job. It doesn't mean you have to do it on your own. By far not. You can't actually do it on your own. But first of all, the ownership is with us as individuals. And what we can do, if you look at the team, in burnout situation or burnout preventions, is basically having a system where you can guide individual towards the right resources and support. And probably the right resources and support, they might not be in the team. Because, if you're in the team, you kind of operationally linked together. There's a vested interest, maybe, it's especially if you talk about hardcore health topics. I think you're guiding people towards more independent resources, people who know about burnouts physiologically, psychologically, and can help you define the strategy that will help you recover and get back to full performance. I think that is, in my view, the key. So it's really like offering the support aside from the team, so that the individual can build him or herself up with the right strategies, approach, and knowledge.
Yeah, because a leader is not a psychologist. So, and I've seen leaders really try and grapple with the psychology of mental health, and that brings their own performance down because at the end of the day, they're stressed about someone's mental health. So having a suite of resources, tools, whether it's EAP, assessments, whatever it is. So here, have you
Yeah.
thought about using some of these and walking the talk as well to some degree? You know, as a leader, if I'm emailing at 4 a.m, is that going to set the tone for everyone else? I'm not sure. Any thoughts on that? Or should everyone just work in the way that suits them best?
So that the second option would be my option, because
Mm.
again, looking also at diversity, especially like if there's obviously common denominators for all human beings, right? Rules that kind of apply to 99%, like 99% plus of the human beings, if they sleep less than 6 hours,
Yeah.
not looking good, right? 100% of human beings, if they don't move, mm, not looking good, right? So there
Mm.
are fundamentals. So so I fully agree with the fact of, role modeling is absolutely central. But, if a person is an early riser and, sends emails at 5 a.m.,
Mhm.
what do I care, right? It's his biorhythm. It doesn't have to be mine. So as long as mine is also respected and I'm not expected to send email at 5 a.m., why not? But again, role modeling, right? So that is also key. Like for example, as a leader, if you look for high performance, you look for high recovery.
Yeah.
There's no high performance without high recovery. This is actually fundamental. And if you are trying to be 100% every day, every second of the day, yeah, this is called a recipe for disaster.
Mhm.
It will never ever work. And this is proven research entirely and thoroughly. There's absolutely zero doubt about it. It's the same in sports, right? With the body and mind. You try to push your body and mind 100% in every training session, you will be less good than somebody who trains, in the range 80 to 90% with large also recovery slots. This is how growth happens, right? So if as a leader you also exemplify these behaviors, that you take your recovery and your performance therefore also very seriously, it is showing the way also for less experienced team members. So certainly also a key role.
And leaders need to model that recovery. And I think it's important that they're not burnt out themselves, because when I've seen a culture and the CEO is burnt out, or the leader of a team is burnt out and is exhausted, it's contagious amongst the team. Everyone starts to go into this kind of state of inertia, and everyone's just sitting there going, we're all so we create stories, and those stories are quite powerful. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, and that was, in the boxing gyms also a huge topic, right? So basically, when you were showing up in the gym, and maybe you were tired, maybe you were lacking the energy and so on, but yes, in the gym you're showing up to do the work, right, with people who want to be world champions. So basically, yeah, you let that at the door, right? There will be time when you can talk about, all the issues and challenges and so on that you have, but yes, you do have a huge impact on the people around you. And if you are not able to basically perform in a healthy manner anymore, then it's time for a big change, right? And to take time to recover, and probably
Mm.
that time is taken outside of the work environment, for the very reasons that you mentioned. But first of all, because if you keep on doing the same, you'll just burn yourself out more, which will have a very negative impact on yourself, but obviously on everyone that you were working with, right? So
Yeah.
I'd say it's kind of, the best for all parts involved. Obviously, finding a way that works. I'm not saying, soon you're exhausted, you have to leave the workplace entirely, but definitely it's time for a significant change. And I'm just like rather flagging the opposite of, burning yourself out to the ground until your last breath is given on the workplace. It's certainly not, the best strategies for yourself, but also not for the people around you. So, and that's that, right? So we all need time out. There's no, and I think, if you talk about high performance, I was reflecting increasingly on that the last few weeks. The mindset is key, right? So there's a lot of things to say about that, but there's, one of the key realization is there's no Wonder Woman in the room. There's no Superman in the room. Full stop. We have to learn to take care of ourselves, and that really means we have to learn to let go on a regular basis, right? And be at 40% and not 100%. Yeah, that's the first realization.
I think that's super important. And that's something that we can learn from sports is they have coaches, recovery coaches, you know, after the big match or after the training session, take an ice bath, get sleep, recover, eat well the next morning, you know, drink your protein shakes, whatever it is. And we can learn to apply some of those principles because if I'm sitting, I know from personal experience, if I'm sitting on my laptop at 11 p.m., because there's just one more email and it can't wait until tomorrow. Tomorrow's not generally going to be a great day. You wake up feeling a
Yeah.
little bit tired and a little bit resentful and a little bit. So at the end of the day, it's really up to us to create the rhythms that will support our resilience. Any other things that workplaces could learn from elite sports?
I think there's actually quite a bit. What I found super interesting, I was talking to two Olympic coaches who were coaching Swiss teams for the Paris Olympics actually, and they've actually spent quite a lot of time and years working also in companies up to 15 years ago,
Hmm.
and therefore they had such an insight into the comparison between the two worlds, and I found that so interesting. They said the biggest difference is the sense of urgency. So within sports teams and elite athletes, the sense of urgency is massively there. They want to know the thing they'll know today. They want to have known it yesterday and have put it in practice 2 days ago. It's like it's never too early, and as soon as they know something, like okay, let me try that out. Okay, it's 2 a.m. But anyways, let's do that because my next competition is in 2 weeks, and by the time I've learned it takes time. So massive sense of urgency, massive readiness, and hunger for change, right? And they compared that to the world of companies where they actually found out it was a bit more the opposite. So huge resistance to change. Even like I relate that also to a lot of work that we do. We are actually talking, sometimes spend an hour session trying to discuss a 5 minute change within a person's life, and a 5 minute fundamental change, right? Something that's so required, which is maybe, moving for 5 minutes a day, at least, something like that. And that's, even finding a solution for that is like, well, I don't have the time, but I can't do this, and there is no alternative. This is always the way things have been done. So it's kind of interesting. So that's also why quite often when we, deliver sustainable performance trainings, the first thing that we start with is the mindset. And the mindset has a super close connection to the sense of urgency. How long are we waiting actually to do and work on what we actually want to work upon, which is actually really cool, interesting, exciting? How long are we waiting to try to be and feel in the way that we think is actually pretty cool? We're pushing that back and back and back, right? So kind of awakening that sense of urgency, I think, is a big big thing that we can learn from elite sports. In a nutshell, it's waking up, right? It's not being in robotic mode, which happens a lot also in companies. Then there's lots of other elements, obviously, that we can learn. A big part of the of an athlete's life is usually we look at three pillars. So first pillar is me, myself, and I, right? Second one is your ecosystem, so it's your team, social context, work context, and so on. The third one is your performance, so you go in the ring, your big project, and so on. But pillar one, right? What do you do when nobody is looking? And that's super relevant for companies, right? So how do you recover? You open that bottle of wine because that's going to make you feel better and destroy your sleep, destroy all your recovery principle, or actually have you learned and researched and understand that actually when you're really tired and you want to recover, well, maybe the best way is have like a good and light meal, plenty of water, go to bed early, and ensure you have actually a lot of sleep. So what do you do when nobody is looking? Binging on Netflix, or going to bed early, ensuring you have good sleep, right? So I think that is also a key aspect. So it's about knowledge and implementation of that also for yourself, and in a nutshell, if you increasingly when you look at sports, it's the full picture. And I think that's something that's critical for each of us in companies to fully realize, understand, and feel is if you look at high performance, this is mind, so it's cognitive performance. This is rooted in your physical health and fitness, right? And this is also has a huge dimension of your soul, so the meaning of what you do, right? So it's looking full picture. You only look at the undermine, the cognitive aspects, you won't reach high performance, at least not in the medium and long term. You only look at the body health. Likewise, it's not going to be enough. You do a lot of things for your health and fitness. You do a lot of things for your mind, but what you do is meaningless. You won't reach high performance. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what the sports is also teaching us, right? So you need to reflect and have strategies and tools on all these levels, not just like a brain on on legs, basically.
Very important. Which leads perfectly into my next question, which is purpose versus financial reward. Or I'm guessing perhaps it's a combination of the two for top performers anyway.
In my view, yes, to some extent, but basically number one is purpose. So you need to have the growth, the meaning, the exciting projects, basically in a nutshell. And financial reward, they are collateral effects, so they have to accompany that. Yeah, it's it's a sound principle. But in a nutshell, if a high performer, who's working with meaning and purpose and so on, doesn't find it in the current team, that financial reward, which is a fair reward, of his performance, then the only thing that happens is that the person will move teams and go find it somewhere else. So I would say first is purpose and growth, and then the rest will kind of, it's the kind of a typical metaphor of the crystal balls and rubber balls, right? You will find another job and position and team where things are hopefully a little bit better. So and also when I coach my team member, the first thing I focus upon is only the growth, the learning, the development, because that's what counts. That's what you can bring. Either it works in that team, and if for whatever reasons, because it's a chaotic systems, what that we live in, so many complex elements. If it doesn't work out, then hey, there are other teams, there are other companies, and that's fine. I'm your coach, so I'm looking for your growth, right? And that might happen somewhere else.
Yeah, important. And being in a high performance team might not be for everyone. That's the other thing I've been thinking about. For some people, they just want to be in a slow paced, methodical team. Not everyone. For example, if you think about a local council or a not for profit, people maybe don't want to be in a team where there's urgency and where there's high pressure and there's challenge and recovery. I know a lot of people who are just quite happy to sit back and cruise mode rather than perform.
Yeah, fully hear what you say, and I think the question in what you describe is also the overall picture, because typically for elite athletes, sometimes they also might have super on the side while they're still trying to make it, like a side job, which should be exactly as you described, super easy, because the energy is being burnt in the training. So you actually want that. So what I would question though is, again, you need to look at the full picture, in my view, of that individual, because if that layback, relaxed mode describe the entirety of the existence of that person, probably something needs to be investigated for that own person's sake, right? So the person should probably go into reflections onto, okay, what am I actually doing? Because again, as humans, whether we want it or not, we're looking for development, right? And that can be actually tamed and watered down by several incidents that have happened in life, and think where we think we're not capable of that, or maybe being burnt out and not yet having recovered and so on. But in all likelihood, if the whole existence is lay back and wait and see, probably there's something more. There's more goal to get out of that, right? And again, it's absolutely not the blaming mode. It's again, you also said, what can we learn from high performing, from elite athletes and high performing sports, basically. And I think, again, this is science and facts. It's not, I think that I have the opinion this and that. Is okay, what's the research saying? What are the facts saying? What can be actually of help right now? So,
Mm.
the person who is basically living maybe at 40-50% of their own potential, it's not, hey, you're so stupid, you should do better, push harder. It's like, okay, let's reflect, what's missing. Maybe there's some knowledge, maybe there's some reflections, and maybe there's some areas that needs to be improved. Very good example for me, I met a very interesting guy in the French Alps about 8 or 9 years ago, a British guy. He was in his mid 50s and climbing super well, super hard, super fit, right? And he had such an interesting story in my view. So when he was, in the end of his 30s, he wanted to very generously to give blood, right? And there was a first small check that you do before. So, picked a little of blood from his finger, and the outcome was, hey man, you're completely anemic. You don't have any red cells to give. Your blood is so poor. And by the way, you have to go to the hospital. And you need to get yourself checked out. There's something
Mm.
which is really wrong with you. So first of all, you don't give blood, and you go to hospital ASAP. And they found out in the hospital that he has super low level of red cells, but also, the white cells was okay, but not that great. And what they found out after, several weeks of investigating that is that he was one of the few person, because, there's not that many actually, who was actually very gluten intolerant. So he was allergic to gluten, but he had no clue about it.
Really? Wow.
And he described that as being reborn when he was, end of his 30s, like 38, 39. He said until then, he was seeing life as being, life is tough and you have to go through the grind, and, that's what life is about. And, trust through, and, warrior spirit. And then suddenly he realized, well, actually, life is pretty cool. It's actually
Wow.
fun. And so that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Sometimes, the challenges are not that easy. That's why I say you need to go to the facts, to the knowledge, to the strategies that are researched, and try them out. Not just the I think that and I think this, right? And that's where change really, really happened.
Amazing. What a story. If people are feeling a lack of engagement in life, sometimes it can be simple things like that, like sort out your sleep, get a blood test, just, attach yourself to a heart rate monitor, see what your heart rate variability is. There might be some clues that you can find that can really make a difference. I love that example. It's powerful. What can a leader do to make high performance fulfilling? Any final thoughts before we sign off?
So, we talked a little bit about the growth environment, right? So it's literally creating an environment where you very consciously, leading with intention. What's my
Yeah.
intention? My intention is to create an environment where each team member can grow. And if growth means they have to, separate ways from my team at some point or forever, this is fine, right? So it's kind of looking for the way and the process rather than just the end goal, right? So really like creating the environment, and that comes with risk because you give a lot of freedom. But this is, in my view, and again, also based on research, the thing that will create the biggest energy and the biggest growth also in a team, right? So I would say that we also talked about a lot of role modeling of the performance versus recovery. So also role modeling that, right? So also talking about it, right? That a human is a pendulum. You should not stay always on the green, because there is no growth that happens when you're not pushing. There's not. If you want to grow,
Mm.
you have to put yourself in discomfort, whatever form that is. Intellectual, psychological, but also physical, going towards deep orange, maybe, hopefully not too much red, and then you go back to green, right?
Mm.
That's the hard part, right? That's why I think this one is so critical, because actually the easiest is to push, 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 push. right? And role modeling the actually, you know what, letting go, boundaries are not reachable. I'm away.
Mm.
Not after that time in the day. Yes, we can do that, but we'll do it tomorrow. Setting boundaries and showing that this can be done is super important. And that, in my view, that combines, as a leader, it's a topic I'm extremely interested in, because I think that's one of the points where most companies are breaking. Not all, but actually, really most of them, is inspirational leadership. So, yes, inspiring your people as a leader, of course it takes skills, right? So people look up to you and like, wow, he's such a good fighter. Oh, wow, he knows so much about this. Wow, he's created so many services, and he's so successful. Wow, how can he do that? I really would love to have these skills, right? To some point, to some part, also authenticity, right? They're looking, hey, it's a strong person. That person stand for him or herself, and that's actually pretty cool, that that authentic pathway. You know what you have in front of you. It's not like kind of a ghost and you're like, not sure whether it's true, not true. You have someone you can kind of believe in, right? So you're showing who you are as a leader. But I think the last pillar is actually almost systematically neglected, but fundamental, and I would call that life path attractivity. In the sense of, if I'm looking towards my leader who can do so many great things in such an authentic manner, but I'm seeing that on the way he sacrificed, for example, his body completely, or he sacrificed his emotional life completely, or he sacrificed, I don't know, his social and family life completely. And basically what I'm looking at is somebody who is destroying himself, consciously, unconsciously. The thing that will happen as a human, whether you want it or not, that's the most interesting aspect, is that you will look away from that. You'll be like, okay, it's cool. Yeah, you can do a lot of great things, but
Mm.
thank you, no thank you.
Mm.
Whether consciously or not consciously, but you will not be drawn to that path. And that's killing inspiration. And that's in the end also killing energy, drive, motivation, and the willingness to actually go, full out in that direction, and actually following that person, that leader, and that purpose that you have in your team. So, again, role modeling, which is kind of a more extreme role modeling, right? Because what I'm saying is like, hey, if you live a crappy life, basically your people around you will also notice, and it's no added pressure, but basically a leader, that starts with leading yourself. Not leading yourself, people will notice consciously or unconsciously, and they will not follow you, or at least not to the same extent.
So important. And I've actually seen leaders, some of the most impressive leaders, dedicate an hour for themselves in the morning to meditate. And people go, how is it possible? Like, you should be much more busy than the rest of us. And they're saying, no, actually, that's critical for me to function as the CEO of a bank. This is what I do, and no one interrupts me. And it's impressive. They lock it down.
Yeah,
Mm,
boundaries, huh?
boundaries. Mishka,
No
thank you so
recovery
much.
without.
How can people connect with you if they'd like to find out more and meet you and your team?
Quite a few ways. So I'm on LinkedIn. So probably one of the easiest ways. So Michka Guerrier. Guerrier means warrior in French. So
Cool.
if you're looking for warrior and Michka, then you'll
Mm,
find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, you can also find High Realities. So High Realities on LinkedIn. Also highrealities.com is the website, and plenty of further tutors, coaches, and people in that team who are my day to day also inspiration. So high performing teams, that's also that, right? So when you're inspired by everyone around you, and that's exactly also what I find also in that company.
wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Click the links in the show notes. You'll be able to connect with Mishka and his team. Yeah, real pleasure. Some very, very important things to think about. And yeah, any final thoughts for those who stuck with us all the way to the end?
Keep it up, guys. It's hard work. It's fun work, right? Because it has meaning. So it's about research, put in practice, and have fun in the process, right? That's where growth is happening. that's the fun part of it. So take care, keep the fun up, playfulness, and thanks a lot, Brad. Super cool conversation
Always.
with you. It was a pleasure connecting again,
Yeah.
and I'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Likewise. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining
Thank
the
you.
session.